If you've been following the noise around 2026, it probably feels like Ferrari are already starting on the back foot. The talk about Mercedes and their potential engine advantage has been loud, dramatic, and honestly a little overwhelming. But here's the thing I want you to keep in mind right from the start. Formula One has never been decided by one idea alone, and Ferrari are absolutely not treating 2026 like a write-off. In fact, if anything, the signs suggest they're leaning into a very different philosophy, one that could quietly keep them right in the fight when these new cars finally hit the track. Yes, Ferrari may not be the team rumored to have cracked some magic internal combustion trick, and yes, that has understandably frustrated a lot of fans. But what gets overlooked in these early conversations is that 2026 isn't just about raw horsepower. It's about how every system on the car works together, and Ferrari seem convinced that aerodynamics, energy management, and smarter design choices can offset any straight-line deficit they might have. That's not optimism for the sake of it. That's Ferrari acknowledging the reality of the new rules and attacking them from a different angle. What's interesting is how calm Ferrari appear in the middle of all this engine drama. Internally, they still believe they can recover any lap time loss through aero efficiency, cleaner airflow, and smarter use of electrical energy. And when you look at how often regulation changes, shake up the pecking order, that confidence doesn't feel misplaced. We've seen dominant engines before. We've also seen teams neutralize those advantages by building a better overall car. That's the gamble Ferrari are taking, and it's a big one. Before we go any further, let me ask you something, because I'm genuinely curious. Do you think engine advantage alone can decide a championship under these regulations? Yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments, because this debate is going to define the next few seasons. And if you're enjoying this deeper, no-nonsense look at what's really going on behind the headlines, take a second to like the video and subscribe. We're pushing toward 2,000 subscribers, and your support genuinely helps keep this channel growing. Now, while Ferrari are quietly working on their own solutions, there's another development happening in the background that adds a whole new layer to this story. It doesn't involve Ferrari directly, but it does involve Mercedes, confidence, and a certain world champion making a very interesting move that has people reading between the lines. That's where things start to get really intriguing, and we'll get into that next. When news broke that Verstappen Racing had signed a multi-year partnership with Mercedes for its GT3 program, it would have been easy to shrug and move on. On the surface, it's just endurance and sprint racing, a side project compared to the intensity of Formula One. But in this sport, context is everything, and this announcement landed at a very interesting moment. Suddenly, what looks like a harmless GT deal starts to feel like a signal, especially when you zoom out and look at the bigger picture heading into 2026. Max Verstappen's team will now be running Mercedes GT3 machinery across major championships, and that alone raises eyebrows when you remember that not long ago his GT activities were tied to Ferrari. That shift matters. It doesn't mean Max is packing his bags for Brackley, and it definitely doesn't mean Toto Wolff is about to get what he's been dreaming of just yet. But it does feel like a door opening, even if it's only slightly. In Formula One, relationships are built long before contracts are signed, and this partnership puts Mercedes and Verstappen's inner circle closer than they've ever been outside of the F1 paddock. What makes this even more fascinating is the timing. Mercedes are openly confident about their 2026 project, and Toto himself has been drawing parallels to the early hybrid era, when their preparation paid off in a way that completely reshaped the grid. Back then, other teams underestimated how much groundwork Mercedes had done, and by the time the cars hit the track, it was already too late. Whether history repeats itself is another question, but it's clear Mercedes believe they're on the right path again. And from Max's perspective, this kind of collaboration costs him nothing. It keeps his options open, strengthens ties with a powerhouse manufacturer, and gives him direct exposure to how Mercedes operate at a technical and organizational level. Even if he never drives an F1 Mercedes, this is still valuable insight. So yes, it might not be a big deal today, but it's exactly how big deals usually start in this sport. Let me throw this to you. Do you think this partnership is completely meaningless? Or do you see it as the first step toward something bigger? Just a simple yes or no, or expand on it in the comments if you want. And if you appreciate this kind of context-driven analysis instead of pure speculation, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on. We're working our way toward 2,000 subscribers, and every single one makes a difference. All of this, of course, ties back to why Mercedes are suddenly being viewed as such a threat for 2026. It's not just about who Max is talking to or what logos are on a GT car. It's about what Mercedes may have unlocked under the hood, and why that potential advantage has everyone else, especially Ferrari, paying very close attention. That's where the real controversy begins. The reason this conversation has escalated so quickly is because of what Mercedes are rumored to have done with their 2026 power unit, and why that idea, if true, could reshape the competitive order. The claim is that Mercedes may have found a way to increase the effective compression ratio of their engine while it's running, exploiting a gray area in the regulations. On paper, that sounds like a massive breakthrough, and depending on who you listen to, it's either the smartest interpretation of the rules we've seen in years or something that borders on bending them too far. Now, it's important to slow this down and add some perspective. Even if Mercedes have found a clever workaround, that doesn't automatically mean they've created an unbeatable monster. The numbers being thrown around range from a small horsepower gain to something far more dramatic. But engineers across the paddock agree on one thing. Jumping from the mandated compression ratios to something significantly higher is incredibly difficult. Thermal deformation alone likely wouldn't get you all the way there. That suggests the real advantage, if it exists, may be more subtle than the headlines imply. And here's where the story gets more interesting. In 2026, horsepower isn't just about straight-line speed. A stronger internal combustion engine helps with battery recharge, reduces clipping, and allows for more aggressive energy deployment. But the flip side is that the entire system has to be balanced. If your software isn't efficient, if your battery management isn't precise, or if your aerodynamics don't support clean airflow, that engine advantage starts to lose its impact very quickly. This is why teams like Ferrari and Aston Martin aren't panicking. Ferrari believe that smarter software, better energy recovery strategies, and improved fuel efficiency can close the gap, even if they're down a few horsepower. And let's be honest, Formula One history is full of moments where an early technical advantage didn't translate into long-term dominance because rivals found better overall solutions. So let me ask you this, because it really gets to the heart of the debate. Would you rather have more horsepower or better energy deployment and efficiency over a race distance? Drop your answer in the comments, because this is exactly the trade-off teams are wrestling with right now. And if you enjoy these technical deep dives that actually explain why things matter, hit the like button and make sure you're subscribed. We're aiming for 2,000 subscribers, and your support genuinely helps the channel grow. The key takeaway here is that even if Mercedes are ahead on one front, 2026 is too complex for a single advantage to decide everything. And that brings us straight back to Ferrari, because while everyone else is staring at engines, Ferrari appear to be focusing their attention on something just as powerful and potentially just as controversial: the way air moves around the car itself. While the spotlight has been firmly fixed on engines and electrical systems, Ferrari have been quietly investing their time and resources into something that could be just as decisive under the new regulations: aerodynamics. And not just any aero development, but ideas that appear to work right up against the limits of what the 2026 rules are trying to achieve. This is where The so-called Ferrari aero trick starts to come into focus, and why rival teams are watching very closely. The intention of the new regulations is clear. The FIA wants cleaner airflow, less outwash, and cars that are easier to follow. That's why the front wing design, floor geometry, and side pod architecture have all been heavily restricted. In theory, this should prevent teams from generating those aggressive vortices that throw dirty air into the path of anyone trying to overtake. In practice, though, Formula One teams don't stop innovating just because the rules tell them to. They start looking for ways around the problem, and Ferrari seem to believe they've found a few. What Ferrari's engineers are reportedly focusing on is how airflow behaves once it passes the front wing and interacts with the tires and suspension. Instead of letting that turbulent air spill outward, they're working on methods to keep it controlled and directed, particularly through the side pod region. This is where tire interaction becomes crucial. By shaping the bodywork and side pods in very specific ways, Ferrari are attempting to guide the air so that it stays useful to the car for as long as possible before being pushed away at the right moment. This is important because even a partial recreation of outwash can offer a significant performance benefit. If you can manage where dirty air goes, you protect the effectiveness of the rear of the car and improve overall stability. It's not great for racing, and it arguably goes against the spirit of the regulations, but if it's legal, teams will do it. Ferrari know that, Mercedes know that, and so does everyone else on the grid. Here's where I want your opinion, because this always divides fans. Should teams be allowed to push against the spirit of the rules if they're staying within the letter of them, yes or no? Let me know in the comments. And if you're enjoying this behind-the-scenes look at how teams really think, make sure you're subscribed and give the video a like. We're getting closer to 2,000 subscribers, and your support helps more than you might realize. The big question is whether Ferrari can execute these ideas better than their rivals. Because once one team finds a loophole, the others follow quickly. The difference is how early you find it and how well you refine it. Ferrari believe they're ahead in this area, and if that's true, it could neutralize any power disadvantage far more effectively than people expect. But no matter how clever the car is, it still has to be driven, managed, and optimized in real time. And that's where the human element comes back into play, especially for a certain 7-time world champion preparing for one of the biggest challenges of his career. No matter how advanced the car becomes, Formula One still comes down to how well the driver and the team can manage everything in real time. And in 2026, that challenge is about to get much bigger. The new regulations place an enormous emphasis on energy deployment, recovery, and timing. And that's why Ferrari's approach with Lewis Hamilton is such an important part of this story. This isn't just about speed anymore. It's about intelligence, communication, and precision. Over the past season, the relationship between Hamilton and his race engineer has been under scrutiny, and not without reason. There were moments where communication felt strained, where instructions weren't clear, and where frustration spilled out over the radio. But context matters. Hamilton knew the car he was driving wasn't going to be a championship contender, and Ferrari had already shifted their focus toward 2026. That kind of environment rarely produces calm, polished radio messages, especially from a driver who expects to fight at the front. What's important is how that relationship appears to be evolving. Reports suggest a much more positive tone toward the end of the year, with open conversations and a clear commitment to work together, going forward. Ferrari aren't tearing everything up and starting again. Instead, they're adding support. One of the most telling developments is the decision to place a dedicated ERS engineer on the pit wall, someone whose sole job is to help manage the complexity of energy deployment under the new rules. That tells you everything about where 2026 is heading. Battery usage, recharge timing, and deployment strategy are going to define lap time. Drivers who understand the system and can adapt on the fly will have a huge advantage. Ferrari believe that smarter software and more efficient energy recovery can reduce the need for constant lift and coast, something that hurt them badly in the past. If they get this right, it changes how aggressively a driver like Hamilton can push over a race distance. So let me ask you this as we wrap things up. Do you think smarter drivers will have a bigger advantage than ever under these new regulations? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is one of the most fascinating parts of 2026 for me. And if you've enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We're working hard toward 2,000 subscribers, and your support genuinely helps make that happen.